All right, everyone, it's 1. Let's start. You can keep eating or go get some more if you want some more. But we're going to start with a word of prayer, and then we're going to get started with some more amazing training as you are bound for the mission field. How was the services today? Who went to the FX service? Raise your hand. Who went to the other service down the hall? People all over the building. All right, let's pray. Jesus, we thank you for this day. We ask that you just bless our time together. And we're thankful, God, for the ability to worship like we've done today in a building like this when there are so many people around the world, God, that we just know they haven't heard once, they haven't had the opportunities we have, and we just pray that we're able to go into these places and make a difference and be able to tell them about you, and that their areas of the world, their spiritual atmosphere will change and things will be different in the natural, in the supernatural, as a result of you intervening. And I just pray for everyone here today. Just ask that you bless us and let us have a great day together. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, if you have your sheets, I'm just going to get started. Feel free to keep eating. That's no problem. All right, so we're going to do a 2-part series, because I can't get this all into one, on ministering cross-culturally. It's very important to realize that everything that we do in the United States does not always work in other countries, so we have to do things slightly differently. 1 Corinthians 9:19, I'm going to read right there. For though I am free from all men, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win the more, and to the Jews I become as a Jew, that I might win the Jews. To those who are under the law, as under the law, I might win those. To those who are without the law, not being without law toward God, but under law towards Christ, I might win those. To the weak, I become as weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. Now this I do for the gospel's sake, that I may be a partaker of it with you. Okay, so let's look today at what culture really is, because you don't realize as much as you are engrafted into the American culture as when a foreigner shows up and tells you all about it. Or you go into another culture and you see how many things are different. So the Peace Corps defines culture as a system of beliefs. That's the first blank, beliefs. Values is the second. And assumptions about life that guide behavior. So it's what people believe, it's what people value. All of that determines their behavior. And it's shared by a group of people. It's not just one person. Generally, we all, in different areas of the world, believe similar things. It includes customs, language, material artifacts. These are transmitted from generation to generation, rarely without explicit instructions. That's the next one. I mean, there's a lot of things we do that you don't realize the rest of the world does or doesn't do. For example, Christmas. You can be with us overseas over December 25th, and there's a lot of countries that it's just another work day, and you're like, you're really not celebrating Christmas? And they're like, I'm sorry, what? You know, the birth of our Savior. You'd be like, nope, today's a work day. You're like, but Christmas for us starts on July 5th. As soon as we've celebrated the 4th of July, man, we're in it. We're in it to win it. I mean, just like the whole time. And they're like, they don't even talk about it. And that's the weirdest feeling. And if you ever go on trips, especially in like November into December, what's always weird is when you're like posting about the African children and the Asian things and stuff. And then on Facebook, people are like, and I'm putting up my 8th tree for Christmas, looking good this year. And you're like, wow, I'm in poverty right now. And you're putting up your 8th Christmas tree. Awesome. So I'm in an area that's not even celebrating it. You just automatically celebrate Christmas because that's what's been in your DNA since you were born. Birthdays, you're like, I can't believe we missed so-and-so's birthday. Some people don't know their birthday. Did you know that? You know, there's a lot of orphan kids and a lot of people in most countries, if you're like, when were you born? You're like, I don't know. When I was little? I don't know. You know, like, what am I supposed to say? It's not like I have a birth record. I was born in a village. So there's things that we do, things that we're used to, things that we're around us right now, like this is church. Come on Sunday morning, worship at 9 and 11 or have an alternate service, then you go home. There's a lot of churches around the world that don't meet on Sundays, don't meet at regular times, meet in very different circumstances, meet with the lights just about off, don't introduce themselves. Others go crazy. It's a dance party like Africa for 6 hours straight. So it just depends where you're going. All of these things we think are normal to us, but not necessarily normal to other people. Culture, it provides a patterned way of doing things, doing it over and over again. You do it all the time. You come to church on Sunday at the same time, same location, do basically the same things. Your work week is very similar, doesn't change much, or your school week. We do things in a patterned way of all the time. It's a super glue that binds people together and gives them a sense of identity and continuity. So identity is that next blank. The identity of the group is most obviously seen in behavior. It's how you act when certain things happen. Like at about 7:15 p.m. last night, I'm pretty sure there's a group of people acting in a similar fashion. And I don't know, I just heard about this one ball that went through the air that changed people's lives forever.
It really did.
That's what I'm saying. See? And you talk to Aussies, they're like, why are you throwing it through the air like that? You just run on the ground with it. And you talk to other people and you're like, that is not football. I don't know. And no, we call it something and they call it something. So more culture coming in. So there's things that we believe together that are seen in our behavior. One of my youth pastors used to use this illustration all the time when he was trying to get us to praise and worship more. And it kind of stuck with me. He's like, anytime you're at a game and you see like a touchdown or a goal scored or something, what's your immediate reaction? You're sitting there like this, but you immediately stand up and raise your hands. Like, why do you do that? Whoever taught you to do that? At what point did your parents sit you down and say, okay, look, whenever you're at a sporting event, if someone scores, someone gets a goal, touchdown, anything, you immediately have to stand on your feet. Let's practice, kids. Everybody sit down, practice, and then put two hands up and yell as loud as you can. But why do we have to do that? Like, nobody ever had that interaction. You just automatically do it. There's certain things that we do that are automatic, and I always think about that. We're like, this is how you praise the Lord, and he's always trying to get us like, you can stand up for that stuff, you can stand up for this, why aren't you excited about that? And same thing keeps going today. But these are things that are ingrained in us automatically to do that. And there's a whole bunch of cultural things that people do in other countries and we do that would be highly offensive both directions. It's just interesting how we have hand signals, words we use, things that we do that transmit a different thing, a connotation to other people. So it's a patterned way of doing things. The group's choices and behavior reflect. The next one is reflect. Reflect their cultural values, which should give the should and ought in order to fit in. It's like whatever you're doing, you want to look like them, be like them. So that's kind of the goal in missions, is you want to be all things to all people. That's why a lot of places we go, we dress like them, we act like them, we stay where they're staying. One of the places, we haven't been there in a while, but we used to go to Mexico quite a lot. In Juarez, it's right on the border, and now it's kind of a very dangerous situation. Well, not so much anymore, it really was at one point. But the area we stayed was actually a garbage dump. We literally stayed in a garbage dump. It was a dry dump. They wouldn't put a lot of other stuff in. It was mostly for that. But we'd help build onto a facility. Our contacts were continually building. We'd always stay there. And one time we saw this other mission team out in the boonies, wherever we were, and all of a sudden they got in a bus and left. I'm like, hey, Tim, where are they staying? And he's like, El Paso. I'm like, well, why are they driving back? That's going to be a big waste of time. And like, well, they kind of have this protocol with their church that they, drive across the border so it's safer and blah, blah, blah. GI's rule, safety third. Anyway, I'm like, so how do the people feel about that? And they're like, oh, they'll show up for the free stuff, but they're not listening to them. That's why when you guys wake up, all the kids are right at the door and all the people are just standing there because you've already communicated by staying with them that you are one of them, you're not different than them, that you eat together, you do all these things together. And he said that alone will speak louder than anything you ever say to them. The fact that you're eating the same time they are eating what they're eating, staying in the dump with them and living there and just doing things with it. That's why all these hundreds of kids keep showing up, is because you've already communicated that. And the other ones, he says they're just showing up for the free stuff and raising their hand when they're supposed to so they can get it, and they know the difference between the two. So that's reflected. The values in a culture are not selected arbitrarily. but reflect an underlying system of beliefs. We believe certain things because it's been taught to us. Sometimes it's been verbal, sometimes it's just by osmosis, but we keep believing certain things. And not every culture is the same by any means. So here's the analysis. It's an iceberg. So I'm going to read down some of these things in a section. And let's see. Oh, shoot. Yay, Wi-Fi. All right. I'll go over these and then we'll watch this. Culture has been aptly compared to an iceberg. Just as an iceberg has a visible section, that's the first blank, visible section above the waterline, and a larger invisible section. Watch this.
The cultural iceberg theory suggests that, like an iceberg, there are only some aspects of culture which are visible or which, in other words, lie above the surface of the water. These can include language, food, greetings, art, music, and many others. These are the explicit manifestations of culture. They are easy to see, taste, or hear. But according to Hall's theory, these are only the tip of the iceberg. The majority of culture, like an iceberg, lies beneath the surface. These aspects are not immediately visible. They can include worldview, religion, spiritual beliefs, decision-making models, power relationships, respect for authority, concepts of time, and many others. These are the implicit manifestations of culture. They can exert an important influence over behaviour, values, feelings, and thoughts. The more immersed we become in a cultural environment, the more these hidden aspects are revealed to us.
So get that image in your mind. Whenever we're in a different culture, the first thing that you usually notice are the obvious things. You get off the plane, you see the way people dress, the way they act, obviously different languages, the food. You find out really quickly that it's different than yours. All of those things are very superficial. The longer you're in a country or the more times we go back, we learn more about different things. And it can be very, very subtle. So some are visible, some are invisible. So culture has some aspects that are observable. That's the next blank, observable. And others that can only be suspected. That's the first one. Imagined or intuited. I-N-T-U-I-T-E-D. Suspected, imagined, or intuited. Also, like an iceberg, the part of culture that is visible, which is the observable behavior, is only a small part of a much bigger whole. So here, I don't have to go over all of them. Here's an observable features of culture versus invisible. There's things that people, you can see on the surface that they do. It's all those things you usually see with your eyes, you hear with your ears, you can hear it in the speech, everything. But then there's some invisible things that are happening. Like over time, you will start noticing. I can go to one of the things I've noticed in a place like Thailand, for example, you can sit on stage as a speaker. And I noticed this because, or I've only known this because I had a friend who did it, unfortunately. He was sitting on stage and he was facing kind of sideways and he was crossing his legs with the bottoms of his feet facing the audience. So imagine that. So he found out really quickly that it wouldn't have mattered what he preached on, because the moment that you show your foot to someone or the bottom of your foot to someone, they immediately take that as you're degrading them, you know, you're talking down to them. So it really doesn't matter. In Thai culture or some Southeast Asian countries that we go to, people would rather you punch them in the face than yell at them. To raise your voice against somebody is very shameful. It's very embarrassing for them. It's like that in Japanese culture as well, just honoring people. You really have to watch those things. And then there's words that get used in even like the Spanish language. Sometimes I've had entire teams of people who are bilingual. I've had entire teams of Puerto Ricans one time with some of the friends we had in Tampa, and we went to Mexico. And I'm like, this is going to be the greatest mission team of all time. I need 0 translators. Everybody speaks the language, which was true. They all did that. But what was funny is they would see signs and they would talk to people and there would be such differences. I'm like, wow, that's pretty impressive. And they would, like, to the point of one time we had to get out of the van. I had to take a picture of them in front of a sign because the Spanish word in Puerto Rico was so over the top, embarrassing, and this in Mexico totally meant something different. It was just the name of a store. They're like, we have got to get a picture. They were like adults, like snickering the whole time, like, get a picture of this, get a picture. I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going on right now, but apparently it's funny to you. But all those things you just don't notice. I lived in Russia for a summer, and it was amazing to me to see like very large Russian men holding hands and doing not like friendship hands, like relationship fingers. Like they're like holding hands like this going down the street. And I'm like, what is going on here in Russia? That's why you're closing the curtain. I don't know. I don't know what's going on there. And I'm not, apparently that's just, which also is in a lot of cultures, I've now found out. But they do it, just sign of affection doesn't mean what we think it might mean, and they're just going for it. And I'm like, well, praise God, I live here. And anyway, so there's invisible and visible ones. And those ones, just kind of the more you go, the longer you're there, there's different things you notice, even just in a week or two. You're like, wow, that's totally different. So entering a new culture, this is the next page, involves encountering a different belief system. So I put some examples I've seen. When we were in Russia, they might have tore down the curtain and communism is still there, though. They might have taken away the KGB or whatever, but they just wear different patches. It was very eerie sometimes, because when you have a society that is communist and they are trained to never stand out, like, if you stand out at all, like, what are you trying to do here? Like, you trying to do some political insurrection or start a mutiny? So even the clothing that they were wearing was generally like gray and brown and neutral tones. I mean, we come out looking like, cotton candy, and they're like, what are you doing? And I'll never forget another time we got on the subway in Moscow. Actually, it was anywhere, in St. Petersburg and everywhere. We got on, and like 5 minutes into it, we're just laughing and talking and everything. We realized we are the only ones talking. In fact, we're the only ones making any noise at all. And everybody's staring at us, and we're like, yeah, okay. Nobody's talking. And you're like, what is going on? That's just been ingrained in their culture. And what was really funny is when we flew home after months of being there, we went through Chicago O'Hare and went through the tram there. We had been so conditioned, we got onto the tram and we're all just standing there looking at each other, and all the Americans around us are all talking it up and yelling and laughing like, wow, you guys really are loud. And I'm like, what are you even talking about? We're just going from point A to point B. But it was, we all looked at each other and we all had that same epiphany. We're looking at each other going, man, we've been conditioned. We're not even talking we're friends. Like, we had a great trip. We just been conditioned. You get on the public transportation system, you don't move. You just sit there, you don't talk. Eating with your hands in India. There's people that would be very weirded out by that, but if you've ever been to India, like, it's just a thing, and it's not just India. There's probably, I can name at least 3 other countries I've been to that it's normal. And they don't have, part of it is poverty. You don't have all the silverware that we do. And, if you live in a village, you're not going to waste money on anything like that, so you eat with your hands. And my kids would appreciate India for that reason alone. Okay, so another time I was in China, and they showed us a picture of high chairs and these babies that were strapped to it. Like, imagine like 10 high chairs in a row and little babies strapped to them with little leather straps, and they can't move. There's a hole in the bottom of their seat, not enough for they like fall down, but just big enough, and they're not wearing diapers. And I remember our contact there saying, so how do you feel about this? I'm like, not too good. I'd like to find who's in charge. Like they're like, well, this is a smaller orphanage of sorts. It's not one of the big ones. But here's a situation. All these children are under the age of about 5 or 6, and one government lady is assigned to watch them. It's her job, 24 hours a day. So she gets a government subsidy of a small amount to live, to buy the food for the kids and keep them alive for an extended amount of time until they either get fostered or whatever. They're healthy, but they just have no home. So she has to do everything for all 10 or 12 kids. Go get groceries, for example. So the only thing she could think of is modify these high chairs and tie the kids down while they're awake so that nobody would fall out of a chair or get hurt, so she could go run down the street, go get the food, and come right back. So she's not gone very long, but what would you do? Could you take 12 orphan kids to the grocery store, which looks nothing like ours? Would you leave them all out in the room? She tried to think of the most humane, safe, sanitary way to monitor them with zero help. You see that picture, you're like, man, what child abuse is going on? She sees it, she's like, I do this 24 hours a day. If you've ever had kids, somebody's always sick or upset or something, and they were all infants, and that's what they just had to do. And you see that picture, like, man, that's unbelievable that they have to do that. So it's a regular thing. Then, which I also pointed out to my kids while we were in Guatemala, underage children working all the time, putting in a 16-hour shift, 8-hour shift. Like, why does that boy have a machete strapped to him? Well, he's going to work. That's so cool. No, it's not. Well, he doesn't have to go to school. Okay, so you're really up for a 16-hour shift of chores. Let's try. Let's try just one day. Let's do a quarter of that. Let's do 4 hours worth of manual labor. Okay, and we'll see how long you keep up. In their mind, like, it's cool, big knife, get to hang out. Yeah, but not when you have to do it 7 days a week and you never have friends and never have education, and this is what you do all the time. So there's different belief systems that we would be like, man, somebody needs to be arrested in all of these situations. In their mind, they're like, what other choice do we have? And you get overcome by some of that. Most of these behaviors and belief systems can be far different than our own, as our own belief systems are challenged and culture shock will set in. So challenged and shock are the two words there. They get totally challenged. Culture shock and stress or fatigue, it's defined as psychological disorientation. That big word, that space there is disorientation. You're coming into an environment that is out of your control. Mission trips in general, I'll just tell you, are going to feel like that from top to bottom because you have no control over your schedule. You don't have your car, you don't have your house or your bed or your phone that works in every place that you're used to working. And you're like, I don't know what I'm eating next, I don't know where I'm going next, I have a vague idea, but it's not always the same. All of that, it's called disorientation. One of the toughest parts of entering a new culture is that you simply don't know or understand the rules. Cultures have rules. We have rules that you don't realize. People older than us, we address differently than people younger than us. We show up and we shake hands. Not every culture does that. They do other things. And you do that in some cultures and it's highly offensive. The way you give gifts. One of the funniest ones I've heard is, I need to verify a couple more sources, but I've now heard it more than once from people who've lived there, is in Vietnam, it's very normal to give a gift and tell someone exactly how much you paid for it. Yeah, see, we're laughing like, oh my God. You're like, and I got you this coffee tumbler for $19.97 plus tax of $234, which brings it to a grand total. Do that, Nick. Just try it. Just do that to somebody. Just like, I bought you a gift, and it costs $48.62. And they're going to be like, thanks. Do it at Christmas. Every gift. Everybody. You want to never have to get invited back to family gatherings. You're like, oh, the gift givers are back. All right. Do you need a calculator and tell me how much I got? I'm like, that would be such an amazing tradition to start here in America. And just start telling everybody. And then I had a coupon for $5 off. So I got it way down. So I had to hardly pay anything for the gift I'm giving you. In fact, this is re-gifted. I didn't pay anything for this. This has been on our family for like 2 years, and we just keep passing it around. We finally break out of our network, and somebody will think it's new. So that one was funny. I think we should try that. All right, so those are rules, expectations. You feel like a baby. I don't know if those of you who've been on a trip, you may not have thought about it in those terms, but in some ways you are. Everything is out of your control. You don't have any way of responding. People are trying to talk to you and you can't talk back, very much like an infant. You can't speak the language nor understand why people are doing what they do. Sometimes it's or what they want you to do. You know, they're trying to explain to you to do something and you're not catching it. That can be overwhelming as well. So having a low it's been likened to having a low voltage hum in the background that finally gets to you. No more, I just can't take it, make it stop. It's like constantly, it's like, I just wish something would be normal again. Well, for them, everything around you is normal. For you, it's just very different. And different doesn't always mean bad, and same doesn't always mean good. That's one thing you have to learn in missions is you automatically judge things, and we got to get over that a little bit. Westerners, aka Americans, see a lot of things in black and white immediately. They see something like that's good, that's bad. They're rich, they're poor. That's funny, that's not funny. Immediately you put it into categories. And it's not always that way. You're late, you're on time. Well, not over here, we're not. If you're got late by an hour, that's not late. That's actually early, or 3 hours, or a day. You know, some cultures, you know, you ever wonder why Middle Eastern weddings and some other weddings are like 3 and 4 and 5 days long? Because people don't show up till like 3 days later. They're like, it started Saturday, but we're gonna get married Monday because not everybody's here. Try that in America. Like, well, I know we're on the clock here at the hotel for the ballroom at $20,000 an hour, but we have some guests out of town that won't be here till about Tuesday. So can you go ahead and keep it open for us? And they're like, sure, because you're about to empty out every dollar you'll ever make. You know, it's just a thing. But for our time, yeah, let's not get started on that too early. I don't want to scare you off. Such as finding that your final exam is in a language you can't read and people keep telling you the questions but you can't understand them. Imagine that happening. A little bit like missions. All these things around you are so different, and even when you have the best of intentions and you're trying and you're trying and you're trying, it just doesn't seem like it's coming across and you just feel like screaming. Just be quiet and leave me alone. Except don't do that. Those italicized words means think those in your head and don't yell them out loud. Okay, so there's 4 phases of cultural stress. Number 1 is tourist. All of us feel this way no matter what country we go to. The very first few days or hours, you feel like a tourist because everything is so new. I would just love to live here. You feel like, you're like after you kind of get over a little bit of the jet lag, you're kind of like, oh man, this is so amazing. Man, I could totally see myself here. Then a few days into it, number 2, frustration sets in. How can these people live like this, and when do I get back to civilization? Like, this is unbelievable. For those who go long term, this happens over the course of months. Short term, it kind of gets condensed over a week or 2. It does all happen. At some point, you do hit a wall, and you're like, you can't get any lower. I haven't eaten. I've been fake eating and eating my snacks. I'm not eating this stuff. I can't. I'm not sleeping properly. There's a dog barking outside. There's insects all around me. It's bright outside. They're having yet another Indian festival 2 doors down from me for hours and hours and hours every night. How many festivals do you need to have? You know, don't you ever work? Like, you can go weeks, and trust me, sleep deprivation, I can go without food, clean water, you know, showers for days and days and days. But sleep, man, come on. It's really hard to go days and days and days without having like at least 3 hours put together where you were asleep the whole time. Eventually you hit that, but then you either adapt, you find ways to overcome it naturally, physically, and through prayer, and you go into the recovery stage. That's the 3rd one, recovery. And you think to yourself, I think it's going to be okay. The last one is acceptance. Most of the time we all are headed towards the plains, and you do feel sad. Everybody, there's different stages of it, but and levels, but I've legitimately had people like try to convince me it's okay if I leave them there. I'm like, no, not so much, you know, you can come back, but we are all getting on the plane. And at some level, when you're finally packing up that last day, you're like, man, it was tough, but look at all amazing things God did when we were here. And then you see the need, and you're like, why do we not have more people here all the time? Why do we not send a team a week? Why do we not have long-term people here helping? Because they can do something immediately. Finding bridges, moving from frustration to recovery. Experiencing cultural fatigue or culture shock is not a sign that we shouldn't have come, or that we're not spiritual enough to cope with cross-cultural ministry. Rather, it is a very natural and normal phenomenon caused by falling into the gaps between our home culture, like something we recognize, and our new one. The key is to find the bridges that will carry us over those gaps of cultural differences. So A, here's how to overcome some of that stuff when you're in another country. Number one, don't get stuck in negative responses such as criticizing the host culture. First one is criticizing, because we have that tendency. If it looks different, sounds different, acts different, we criticize it. That can't be right. We need to educate these people and do something different. Don't do that. Number two, rationalizing inappropriate behavior. That's a tough thing because there is a difference between accepting people and condoning their actions. I'll just let that sit in there because we hear it a lot on social media and the news and everything. Just accept everybody, accept everybody, accept everybody. I'm not too sure how many Christians actually don't accept people. It doesn't mean we condone every one of their actions. I really don't have a lot of friends that go around to every little vice that you can name and be like, I can't believe you do that. I can't believe you do that. You can't come to our church. I personally don't know anybody who does that. And I can't imagine doing that. We've had people come into our church wearing full hijabs, and I can't, which is the coverings that Islamic women wear. I don't know if too many people, I didn't, and I don't know, I polled the pastors. I don't think anyone went up to them like, you're going to have to change and you can't come into our church. I don't think that happens as much as the news would like us to believe. You accept people because God created them in his image. That is just natural. Condoning behavior is a completely different thing. So when you are going into a different culture, there might be things that people do that you have to put through a filter. This is a whole nother set of teaching, but basically what you're doing is there's a difference between being different in culture and actually being sinful. And that's what you have to pray through and look at and understand from their point of view. It's not justifying actions. There are some things that are very, very, very black and white in the Bible. And people are like, well, it's how you interpret it. Well, no, it's not. Sin is sin, and I'm not sure there's levels. You know, it's either is or it isn't. So rationalizing it and including our own. There's things that we do. I'll tell you one of the number one things Americans do and American teams do that does not translate into other cultures, and that's sarcasm. We're like, oh, that's just the way I am. Well, stop. Because that's not translating. When people hear you talk and in a team, you're like, oh, we just get along that way. No, it's actually a defense mechanism and you're trying to overcompensate for things. And I remember one time, I don't know how the conversation came up, but we were driving and I think I'm not going to call them out which one did what, but my boys were talking in the back and I'm like, come on, don't be sarcastic. And then here comes the question, well, what does that mean? How do you explain the word sarcasm to a 7-year-old? So I tried to think of a definition really fast, and the basic one I came up with is, you know the truth about something, but you say the opposite in order to hurt somebody. You know, they're coming down the stairs like, well, I guess everybody's on time. Well, no, they're not. You knew that they were late, but you're saying it in such a way that you want to hurt them. That's what my 7-year-old version of defining sarcasm is. We do that a lot as Americans, and not a lot of cultures do that, and it sounds, some do, but not a lot do. They're kind of more black and white. They'll either tell you or they won't, and we do it sometimes too much. The third one is withdrawing from the culture and or the team. Don't do that. Please don't do that. It's very easy to get this mentality, oh, only 5 days left. I'll just shut my mouth and stand in the corner and who cares, just as long as I get home, I'm just never doing this again. You do that, you're going to waste all your time, money, the prayer, the support, everything that you could have done, things that God could have done through you while you're there. It's very easy to do that to your team. When the team leader's like, okay, I need 3 people giving testimony, someone praying, and you're like, forget it. I can't say anything in their language. They don't get what I'm saying. It's too hot here. I haven't showered in like 4 days. I've been eating like granola for like 3 days, and I feel sick. I feel tired. I got jet lag. Yeah, welcome to missions. All of that stuff's happening, but the point is these people have come to see you, to be with you. God's ordained it. He's orchestrated so much of it so that it can actually happen. So don't withdraw from it all. Look for the why behind behavior rather than seeing things as wrong. Ask. I always ask. I'm like, so tell me about that, why is the baby got coffee in her bottle? Just tell me. I don't know. I mean, not saying it's wrong, but she is 6 months old. And that is straight coffee. You didn't even put milk in it or anything. Well, I just gotta, okay. All right. Jesus' method in John 4 when he encountered the Samaritan woman at the well, there's a lot of things that he did that the disciples, sometimes they question. It's like, why are you talking to Samaritan? Why are you talking to a woman? Why are you doing all these things? At the end of the day, it makes it into the Bible. We quote it. We utilize it. It's for missions, for outreach, for evangelism, crossing cultural boundaries, and getting the world saved. That is what Jesus came for, so that's why he did that. Realize that how well you understand and can handle a different culture is less important than how well you can understand and handle yourself. Because you don't have to understand absolutely everything by the time you leave. It's going to be overwhelming on certain levels, but not so much on others, and you don't have to figure it all out. The best way to do it is keep going back, keep praying, keep doing research, keep thinking about the country. Even when you come back, you're like, man, now I understand when I read about this stuff, this is why they do it, and now I've seen it firsthand. Understanding our expectations. This is the last page. Disciplining our expectations is a key bridge builder. Expectations can challenge and grow us. That's the first one. Grow us, or disappoint and defeat us. Every time you see something new, every time you see something that's different, it's either going to grow you or defeat you. And you have the choice to let it do one or the other. Because you'll see it and you're like, huh, that's interesting. You know, I didn't realize they did that. You're in Africa and you see people going down the road with a coffin that's painted like a fish, and they're running through the streets. You're like, wow, I haven't seen that before. Well, that's because they paint things on the coffin that are close to what they did for their lifetime. So that man was probably a fisherman, and they're doing it to honor him. You're like, looks like they're carrying a big dolphin down the street that's made of wood. But nope, there's a body in there, and that's how they do it. And you're like, well, that I'm going to choose to let me grow, because that's just unbelievable. Guilt, busyness, and disappointment are common characteristics of people encountering or entering new cultures. Guilt emerges because we don't feel like we are doing enough or accomplishing enough. Busyness does not mean you're accomplishing anything. I sometimes watch social media and certain people and friends and things like that. I'm like, wow, you are very busy, but by your life and when I see you in person, it doesn't look like you're accomplishing very much. You know, busyness doesn't mean that. And then doing a bunch of accomplishments doesn't actually mean you're being effective. You know, it doesn't, just because you did all the things doesn't mean that you actually broke through to someone and built that relationship. You know, you can set up and do a huge feeding and tons of people come. But if you never talk with the people, if you never pray with the people, if you never sit down and get to know their story, you're not breaking that wall of, I'm on this side of the soup line and you're on that side and here's your food, poor person. Oh, you know, go with God. That's not going to change people's lives. They're coming maybe because they're hungry, but they should leave because you've imparted into them the life of Jesus Christ that you've experienced. People have sent us here, and we've all come, this is by the time we get there, with some sacrifice and hoping to accomplish something. These feelings spill over into busyness. If I only do more, then maybe I'll succeed. If I appear busy, then people can't criticize me for not doing anything. This kind of busyness leads to disappointment. The experience just isn't measuring up to what you had hoped it would be. To deal with this, we must clarify why we are going on a short-term mission trip and give all those expectations into God's hands. Often we don't realize that we have a certain expectation until they have not been met. Top 2 questions when you get back from the mission field: what did you eat and how many people got saved? You're like, well, what did you eat over the last 2 weeks and how many people got saved at your work that you've been at for 10 years? You know, like, it just different ways that we analyze everything we do on the mission field. You have to put it all in God's hands and just say, you know, whatever the contact's vision is for this nation, whatever God has ordained, this is not arbitrary by any means. The amount of planning we put into this, the time you put into in prayer, fundraising, everything else, all those things that we do together, you got to better believe that God is behind it all. These are all God-ordained events. The quality of our experience in another culture will largely be determined by our expectations and our reasons for being there. Therefore, we must be clear about why we are going, as well as clarify our expectations so they can be realistic and fruitful. You know, our main goal is very biblical: bear fruit and fruit that remains. Whatever we're doing, you're either planting seed among people who've never heard, watering seed, that people have maybe heard they're not totally engaged with a pastor or a church locally, or you're seeing a harvest. We get to those points where we can lead people to the Lord, and you're like, wow, this is amazing. But there's been a process before that. And then when we're gone, we want to hear testimonies about, okay, last year when you came, this is what started. It's not all about us, but we want to be that catalyst that when we show up, something starts getting into motion and God takes over. So here's some things to think about, and we can even do these in our when we break out into our teams. But let's do that now. It's about 1:45. Let's have Guatemala stay here. Nepal, let's go across the hall to the one with the 109. Kenya for now can go to 108. And if I didn't mention the teams that you're on, stay here momentarily. All right. Grab those sheets and any other paperwork you need.